here we are, starting off a brand new dev stream. This is our second week of doing this, and, well, I'm just as excited as all the rest of you kiddos out there, ready to get down and do some dirty old game development. So, last time on Before Eden Live Development Stream Z, we were looking at scriptable objects and putting them into our game, and it was kind of biting off more than we could chew in one stream. It actually took me, after the last stream ended, which lasted a good while, like 3 or 4 hours, it took me like the entire next day of nonstop coding to finish that. So for those of you who didn't tune in last time, basically what happened was we so the whole idea of scriptable objects is that you can take stuff and they can live as assets in your scene rather than as mono behaviors, or sorry, they can live as assets in the assets folder rather than assets or game objects directly in the scene. So let's go ahead and switch on over to our desktop here. We'll carry him off. Just make sure this is all good to go. Alright, that looks about right. So, so yeah, basically what we did is we had in our, so this is the main menu, which is like the normal entry for the game. So here's our menu. Before you can start game quit, that's all we have. And then we have our, I call it demo 2 because this is the second kind of demo version of the game that kind of basically turned into the main game. So we've got this scene here, which has pretty much all of our game assets so far. And in here we had this thing called the game test helper, and I had a whole bunch of components which were copied over from the main menu. And the problem with that was that I'd have to delete this game test helper anytime I went back to save the scene and went to the main menu, and it wasn't great. And then basically I was like, okay, well, there's this thing called scriptable objects that we can use instead. So now you see in our scriptable objects folder, there's a whole bunch of scripts that were just mono behaviors that instead we turned into scriptable objects. So let's get Visual Studio open here. You don't need to hog this. Oh, did it just close? My goodness. So anyway, basically now you can see, all right, prima donna. So yeah, basically, so like all these scripts, so for example, like the player manager is now the player manager SO. We have this tag at the top, create asset menu, which is cool because basically now whenever you want to create an instance of a scriptable object, because you can have multiple of the same, you go create and then you specify the folder and you can actually create an instance of it which has its own set of data. Hold on 1 second here. I've got a little list of some goodies to talk about, so let me go back to the little intermission screen here. Okay, so let's do some talking. Okay, so here's my scriptable object notes. So, okay, so there was a couple things that I learned after the last stream ended. And number one, the awake call is not made in the editor play. Like when you hit play, awake on a scriptable object is not called. The call is made when you run it in a built executable. So the problem was that basically I'd hit play and all the awake code wouldn't run in editor mode, but it would if you actually made an executable and ran it. So my solution, which I wasn't thrilled about, was to manually call awake and destroy using the play mode state changed. So I can demonstrate that. So let's go back and take a look at our live scene here. All right, and yeah, so basically what I actually wound up having to do is I had to make something that kind of all the scriptable objects could live in. So I created this scriptable object. I called it was global scriptable objects. And basically what it would do is it so basically whenever we would try to so basically we've got a property in here. So this is a static class. So anywhere that needs to access something like the player manager, now that lives outside of runtime, and it lives in its own little special box in the scriptable object. I guess I wanted to show this real quick. So for example, the player manager SO. So this is actually a script, right? And you can create as many different kinds of, we could have 1 player manager, 2 player managers, 3 player managers, however many you want. So I'm putting SO on the end to basically say like, hey, this is a scriptable object. So, but then you actually have to create it, which we added, to all these scripts at the top. We have that create asset menu tag. And so in the tag, you can say, the file name that it'll spit out by default, and then you have, the menu. When you right click, it'll be in the scriptable objects, and then what it's going to be called in there, and then the order tells it where it is in that list. So nothing too crazy. So yeah, basically we created this scriptable object, and then we have this guy called the global scriptable objects SO, which, as you can see in here, in the global scriptable objects, we actually have a reference to the global scriptable objects SO. So basically what we wind up doing is whenever someone tries to use this, the very first time it gets used, we have a private static reference to a global scriptable objects SO object. And what we do is, first of all, we find the asset named global scriptable objects SO. And as long as we found one, we get the path to it, we load the asset. And so basically what it does is it finds this using this asset database.find assets. So you could do resources.load, but I've read that you're not supposed to do that it's very slow. I haven't tested it, and it's probably more for like mobile applications and stuff where that might actually matter and really come into play. But here, not so much, or who knows, right? But it's always better to do whatever the best practice is. And so I hadn't actually used the asset database before, so this is my first time doing that, which you're going to have to become familiar with if you actually want to work with scriptable objects, because this is how you can directly pull them out of your assets folder. So when we do this asset database find assets, when you use this T, that's basically looking for a type, and then rather than putting in I could literally just type in T global scriptable objects SO, right? But we want to be dynamic here and actually just get the type of that script, and then so we get its type of the script and the name, and then basically you kind of do this mumbo jumbo here that you just have to do to work with the asset database to get the actual path to it, and then you load it out and we populate our global scriptable objects SO. Now there's some other supporting scripts in here to kind of make this all work. We're not going to go through that right now. We don't have time. This is going to be a shorter stream today. I just kind of wanted to show how that all worked. So basically the end goal here was to make it so that I could start the game. I can hit play from the game scene test helper, and then you'll notice I added this sprite here. So basically here's a little sprite of the character, just for reference, because the character no longer has to live in the scene. Now the character is always instantiated where this little sprite is if the game scene test helper is there. Now another piece of code that I added is when the game comes up, it first checks and says, hey, is there a games, if we're coming from the menu, before it tries to spawn the player or do anything, it goes and asks, hey, is there a game scene test helper here? And so I added a little tag here, game scene test helper. I was like, hey, if you find this thing, nuke it and don't let it actually load up its stuff. but that's specifically if we're coming through gameplay in a normal mode. So now, what we wind up doing because of the scriptable object stuff is now I can hit play from any scene, and as long as I have this game scene test helper, the player will spawn wherever his little icon is. And additionally, I don't have to remove that game scene test helper. If I hit play from the main scene, it'll automatically basically boot up, and we just have one instance. So rather than worrying about, keeping track of, the player manager in the main menu, the player manager, what it looks like, because all these things are going to change over time, and there should only be one reference to the player manager ever. It shouldn't have multiple references across multiple scenes, and the way you do that is through scriptable objects. So we'll just demonstrate here. Hit play. And boop. Our boy pops out, and there he is. He's fully playable, and we can start playing the game here. It's a little chuggy right now. It's like when it first loads. So there you go. And then also to demonstrate, now we'll leave the game scene test helper here. We'll go straight to the main menu. We'll hit play. Start game. And hey, would you look at that, there's the player. So good stuff all around, I think. Yeah, let's make it. Alright, so basically, yep, there we go, there's our player. And we can play the game. Everything works. So, yeah, looks good. Looks good to me there. So, we accomplished what we set out last stream. And then, as previously mentioned, this is going to be a short stream today. So, yeah, we're going to leave it there, I think, as far as the actual game dev goes. A couple other things we can highlight is next steps. So next time, there's a piece of software called Spine that I learned about. Excuse me. And it essentially lets you do 2D animations, and it looks really cool. I kind of wanted to check it out. It's also kind of expensive, so maybe not. But I've got to wait to think about that before the next dev stream. So basically, yeah. So the main thing before I can release any sort of demo for the game is currently there's content in the game that I ripped from other games just to be able to get off the ground. So specifically, we have our ranged enemy. And if you notice, the ranged enemy is none other than Mega Man X. Can't have that. So we're gonna have to create a custom. So by the way, I did all the bad guys for this game except for like one that I bought. So yeah, I guess either we can look into buying another character, a sprite sheet animation character, or we can just animate our own. So yeah, we'll be exploring that next week, looking at replacing this character. And then there is the grunt enemy. Where are you, grunt? Where are you, little grunty? Let's see. Grunt enemy? That's enemy grunt. Grunt enemy. Put in too many E's. What the heck? Grunt enemy. There he is. Now, what you'll notice about this character is he is not colored. He is not colored at all. What you might also notice is some of his animations are okay. Like his attack animation looks pretty cool. Where is that? Yeah. You can see there's some like feet clipping in there that needs to get cleaned up. And then we also need to but one of the problems is his walk cycle. It's not pretty, it's not great, it's just serviceable. So we need to clean that up a bit. Also, you'll notice he's not colored, so we need to give him some color. He needs some love. I made this like as quickly as possible. You can see like the size of his eye changes dramatically. It's actually not that bad for a little walk cycle. It's kind of cute. I like him. I think he's adorable. So yep, I think we're gonna leave it there for today. And yeah, we'll pick this up next week, and we will look into taking this to the next step. So we will go back to our little intermission screen here. Probably shouldn't narrate that, but I'm going to anyway. And yeah, thanks for checking us out today, and we'll see you all next time.